The sound of shattering glass echoed through the entire studio, followed by complete silence. Then Ursula Andress's voice, shaking with rage, cut through the air like a knife. "I am done being treated like a piece of furniture." What happened next would shut down production for 3 days and create the biggest scandal in Hollywood history. It was March 8, 1965, and Ursula was filming The 10th Victim in Rome's legendary Cinecittà Studios. She had arrived that morning in a good mood, excited about working with director Elio Petri on what was supposed to be a groundbreaking science fiction film. But by 2:47 p.m., everything had gone completely wrong, and the woman who had charmed the world as Honey Ryder was about to show a side of herself that no one had ever seen before. The trouble had started 3 weeks earlier, but none of the crew realized they were sitting on a powder keg about to explode. Ursula had been growing increasingly frustrated with how she was being treated on set. Despite being an international star after Dr. No's success, she felt like the Italian crew was dismissing her as just another pretty face rather than a serious actress. The morning of the incident began like any other. Ursula arrived at 6 a.m. for makeup, her usual professional smile in place. But those closest to her noticed small signs that something was building. Her jaw was tighter than usual, her responses shorter, and there was an intensity in her eyes that hadn't been there before. What nobody knew was that Ursula had spent the previous night on the phone with her agent, discussing a series of humiliating experiences that had been accumulating for weeks. The director had been making changes to her character without consulting her, reducing her dialogue and turning what was supposed to be a complex female lead into little more than eye candy. When she tried to offer suggestions or ask questions about her character's motivation, she was brushed off or ignored entirely. The breaking point came during filming of a crucial scene where her character was supposed to confront her male co-star. Ursula had spent hours preparing, working with an acting coach to develop the emotional layers. She understood her character's psychology and had specific ideas about making the scene more impactful. But when cameras started rolling, director Elio Petri immediately gave her direction that contradicted everything she had prepared. "No, Ursula," he called out after the first take. "Don't think so much. Just be beautiful and say the lines. That's all we need from you." The words hit her like a physical blow. Ursula stopped mid-scene and stared at the director with disbelief. "Excuse me?" she said, her Swiss accent becoming more pronounced as her anger began to rise. "What did you just say to me?" Petri, apparently not sensing the danger, doubled down on his comment. "You're overthinking it. You're not Sophia Loren or Anna Magnani. You're the beautiful girl from the Bond film. Just be that." That's when something inside Ursula snapped. She walked directly to the craft services table, which was loaded with expensive catered food and drinks for the cast and crew. Without warning, she swept her arm across the entire table, sending plates, glasses, and food flying across the studio floor. The crash was deafening, and everyone on set froze in shock. But Ursula wasn't finished. She turned to face the director and the assembled crew, her face flushed with anger and her voice trembling with fury. "I am not just a beautiful girl from a Bond film," she declared, her words carrying clearly through the stunned silence. "I am an actress. I have a brain. I have ideas. And I will not be treated like a mannequin in expensive clothes." The entire studio was dead quiet. 60 crew members, actors, and executives stood frozen, unsure of what they were witnessing. Ursula Andress, the epitome of Swiss elegance and professional composure, was having a complete meltdown in front of everyone. Director Petri, his face red with embarrassment and anger, tried to regain control of the situation. "Ursula, you need to calm down. This is unprofessional behavior. We have a schedule to keep." Those words were gasoline on an already raging fire. Ursula marched over to the director's chair where Petri kept his script, notes, and personal items. She picked up his leather script binder, which contained weeks of work and notes, and hurled it across the studio. Papers scattered everywhere as the binder hit a bank of expensive lighting equipment. "You want to talk about unprofessional?" she shouted, her voice carrying a fury that sent chills through everyone present. "Let me tell you what's unprofessional. Unprofessional is changing an actress's lines without telling her. Unprofessional is dismissing her input because you think her only value is her appearance. Unprofessional is treating a human being like a piece of set decoration. The studio executives who had been watching from the sidelines tried to intervene, but Ursula wasn't finished. She was on a roll now, releasing 3 weeks of pent-up frustration and years of being underestimated in an industry that often reduced women to their physical attributes. She walked over to the elaborate set that had been constructed for their scene. It was a futuristic interior that had cost tens of thousands of dollars to build. Without hesitation, Ursula began systematically destroying it. She kicked over a modernist chair. She swept decorative objects off tables, sending them crashing to the floor. She grabbed a futuristic lamp and threw it against the wall where it shattered into hundreds of pieces. Every piece of this set, she announced as she continued her rampage, cost more money than most people see in a year. But somehow, there's no money in the budget to treat your actors with basic respect. The crew watched in fascination and horror as she picked up an expensive vase that was part of the set decoration and held it over her head. For a moment, she paused, looking directly at Director Petrie. "You want me to be just a beautiful object?" she asked, her voice now eerily calm. "Then watch how beautiful objects can be destroyed." She hurled the vase to the ground, where it exploded into ceramic shards. The destruction continued for several more minutes. Ursula overturned tables, broke props, and scattered expensive set pieces across the studio floor. The sound of her rampage echoed through the building, and crew members from other productions began gathering to see what was happening. Finally, when she had exhausted her immediate targets, Ursula stood in the middle of the destruction she had created. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup was smeared, and her costume was torn, but her eyes were blazing with satisfaction. "Now," she said, addressing the shocked director and crew, "we can have a conversation about how this production is going to proceed. Or I can walk out that door right now and you can explain to the studio executives why your lead actress quit in the middle of filming." The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone understood that they had just witnessed something unprecedented in Hollywood history. Major stars simply didn't behave this way. They might throw private tantrums or make demands through their agents, but they didn't destroy sets and publicly humiliate directors in front of entire crews. Director Petrie, his face pale and his hands shaking, tried to salvage his authority. "Ursula, this is completely unacceptable. I'm going to have to call the studio heads about this." "There will be consequences," Ursula laughed, a sound that was both beautiful and terrifying. "Call them," she said. "Please call them right now." "I'd love to explain to them why their leading lady felt it was necessary to destroy a movie set to get their attention." What happened next shocked everyone even more than Ursula's rampage. She walked calmly to the phone that was used for production communications and dialed the direct number for the studio head. When he answered, her voice was perfectly composed and professional. "Hello, Mr. Rossellini," she said sweetly. "This is Ursula Andress. I'm calling from the set of The 10th Victim. I wanted to let you know that we've had a small incident today, and I think you should come down to the studio to discuss how we can improve the working conditions for your actors." The conversation continued for several minutes, with Ursula calmly explaining her grievances while standing in the middle of the destruction she had created. She detailed the script changes that had been made without her input, the dismissive treatment she had received from the director, and her concerns about the overall tone of the production. When she hung up the phone, she turned back to the stunned crew. "Mr. Rossellini will be here in 30 minutes, she announced. "I suggest we use that time to clean up this mess and prepare to have a productive conversation about how to make this a better film." The crew stood frozen for a moment, unsure of what to do. Then, surprisingly, it was Ursula herself who began picking up the debris from her rampage. She gathered broken pieces of props, straightened overturned furniture, and began organizing the scattered papers from the director's script. As she worked, she continued talking to the crew in a tone that was completely normal, as if nothing unusual had happened. "I know this seems extreme," she said while picking up pieces of the broken vase, but sometimes extreme situations require extreme responses. I've tried to address these concerns through proper channels for weeks, but nobody was listening. Other crew members slowly began helping with the cleanup, though they kept glancing at Ursula with a mixture of awe and fear. The woman who had just destroyed an expensive movie set was now calmly organizing the remains as if she were hosting a dinner party. When studio head Roberto Rossellini arrived 30 minutes later, he found a mostly cleaned-up set and a focused crew. Ursula met him at the entrance, looking composed despite her slightly smeared makeup. The meeting that followed lasted 3 hours and included several studio executives. Ursula presented her concerns with executive professionalism, outlining specific problems with the script, direction, and character treatment. She had prepared a detailed list of suggestions for improving the film, complete with alternative dialogue and character development ideas. It became clear that her earlier rampage wasn't a spoiled star's tantrum, but the explosion of a creative professional who had been systematically ignored. By the end of the meeting, significant changes had been agreed upon. The script would be revised to restore much of the character development that had been removed from Ursula's role. Director Petri would work more collaboratively with the cast on character interpretation. And perhaps most importantly, there would be regular meetings between the creative team to ensure that all voices were heard throughout the production process. But the most remarkable outcome was the transformation in how the crew treated Ursula. Word of her explosive confrontation spread quickly through the Italian film industry, but rather than damaging her reputation, it actually enhanced it. People began to understand that behind the beautiful exterior was a serious actress who was passionate about her craft and willing to fight for what she believed in. The incident also marked a turning point in Ursula's career. She was no longer seen as just the pretty Bond girl who had gotten lucky with one iconic scene. She was now recognized as a force to be reckoned with, someone who could stand up to powerful directors and studio executives when necessary. The filming of The 10th Victim resumed 3 days later, and the difference in atmosphere was immediately apparent. The crew treated Ursula with a new level of respect. Director Petri consulted with her on creative decisions, and the overall quality of the production improved significantly as a result of the collaborative approach that had been implemented. Years later, Ursula would reflect on the incident with mixed emotions. "I'm not proud of destroying the set," she would say, "but I'm not sorry for standing up for myself." Sometimes, when people won't listen to your words, you have to find other ways to communicate. The story became legend in Hollywood, inspiring other women in the industry to demand better treatment. Director Petri eventually acknowledged that the incident had been a wake-up call, admitting he had been dismissive of Ursula's input. The destroyed set was rebuilt within a week, costing the production $50,000 in delays and damaged property. But the improved collaboration that resulted was considered worth the expense. Most importantly, Ursula's explosion demonstrated that even the most elegant people have limits. Her willingness to risk everything to demand respect showed courage beyond anything she had displayed in film roles. The day Ursula Andress destroyed a movie set became the day she truly became a star, not just for her beauty or famous bikini scene, but because she had shown the world she was a force to be reckoned with. In an industry that often tried to silence women, her refusal to be quiet made all the difference.